Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are going into day 27 of the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, and obviously its Western allies in the form of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and other nation states as well. But first and foremost, what I want to talk about at the beginning of this video is the discussion of casualties. I know we have recently seen an alleged Russian tabloid media outlet allegedly post certain Russian casualties numbers. That was then stated to be a hack in which those numbers were posted. But we've seen these numbers time and time again, something around, in terms of the number of Russian KIA'd, upwards to 10,000, and quite possibly in excess of 16,000 wounded, if not more. And looking at that number, I would say is an incredibly high number, and quite frankly, I don't believe that number in terms of the amount of casualties that report again has reported that the Russian military has sustained. Now, with that being said, a lot of those numbers obviously are coming from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. And what's very interesting is the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense does not post any casualty numbers of its own forces, or of late we really haven't seen anything. And given the intensity of the fighting and the widespread use of some of the tactical air assets and the cruise missiles that the Russians have been utilizing in this conflict, I would suspect that again the Ukrainian casualties would be on par with Russian casualties, if not greater than the actual Russian casualties themselves. So have the Ukrainians suffered more than 10,000 KIA'd? I mean, I guess it's possible, but again, I think we're kind of getting into the realm of speculation. And at this point, nobody really knows. Even in prior wars, such as the first Gulf War and the second Iraq invasion of Iraq, we had seen numbers that at times were quite possibly grossly inflated. Even during the Yugoslav wars, in which we saw the NATO bombing of Serbia. Initially, the amount of casualties that it was suspected that the Serbs had endured was much higher than what reality was, and now fast forward many decades after that battle and that war. Obviously, we know now that the Serbians, the Serb military, and its paramilitary police organizations did not suffer as many casualties as initially suspected. And I would say in this conflict as well, I think especially in terms of what the Ukrainians are reporting, is probably much higher than what is actually occurring on the ground. Now, with that being said, this is a very high-intensity conflict, and obviously there are casualties being sustained on both sides. But what that number is, we really can't say at this point, and especially given the fact that a lot of these areas are being hit with some very large ordnance, such as the Iskander ballistic missiles, and a lot of these systems are very accurate. We saw recently the attack on the shopping outlet, the mall facility near Kyiv, and that was a very precise strike that quite possibly was an Iskander strike. The way that the ballistic arc of the missile impacted almost vertically, and the size of the explosion. I would suspect that's probably what it was. But again, a lot of the KIAs from that type of ordnance, you simply aren't going to find them. They're gone. And again, I think that's part of the difficulty in ascertaining the kind of casualties that we're seeing in this conflict. And then again, at the same time, especially in terms of the Ukrainians, a lot of their casualties right now, and especially those of some of these foreign fighters that are being introduced into the country, are state secrets for the most part. They are not releasing a lot of this information in terms of the casualties that they are sustaining in this conflict. And it kind of goes for the Russians as well. Obviously, the Russians are not reporting their total casualty estimates as well, and obviously they are definitely sustaining casualties. So we really don't know what the casualties look like at this point. There are estimates ranging from each side, 2,000 on up to really kind of astronomical estimates up to 10,000. I think the U.S. Department of Defense has it somewhere around 7,000, possibly, maybe more, maybe a little less, maybe a lot less. Again, but we just don't know at this point. So we'll continue to watch that and track that, but I think you have to really take it with a grain of salt, especially some of these inflated numbers that are coming from the Ukrainian side. I mean, if those estimates are correct, then yeah, the Russians are absolutely sustaining catastrophic casualties in terms of the amount of forces they've deployed in the short time that the war has been underway, less than obviously a month. But we'll continue to watch and report, and eventually we'll know the facts about what these casualty estimates actually look like at the end of the day, in the far future. But obviously the fighting continues. We're seeing the Ukrainians conduct limited offensive operations both near Kyiv and down towards Mykolaiv in the direction of Kherson. First and foremost, it would appear that we've seen the Ukrainians push back both on the east side of the Dnieper River and on the west side of the Dnieper River, encroaching on some of these far west suburbs that the Russians had initially taken. And that kind of brings me to another point in terms of these operations near Kyiv. I know initially the Russians were looking at quite possibly sealing Kyiv off, and as I talked about in a previous issue, the Russians are almost operating with an operational plan that would also have them being enveloped. So again, if they envelop Kyiv in terms of the area of operations that the Russians are currently fighting in, and obviously the area in pink is the Russians, the area in yellow is the Ukrainians. But again, if we were to hypothetically fast forward and then have the Russians seal off Kyiv, and just kind of going around where my cursor is, well, the Russians would then be facing a enemy obviously to the front in terms of those besieged forces inside of Kyiv. And again, this is a huge city of 3 million people. Obviously, it's been reduced from that personnel level, but there's a lot of military units based in and around Kyiv. And then also, the Russians would be facing Ukrainian forces to their rear. And again, there's a lot of very large cities and built-up areas outside of that zone of encirclement that the Russians would be looking to conduct. So again, the Russians would yes, they would seal off Kyiv and encircle Kyiv, but at the same time, quite possibly, they would be then having the Ukrainians encircle them, and especially those forces that would be deployed near Kyiv, again, would have to be looking towards Kyiv, and at the same time, they would also have to have forces looking towards the west, towards the south, and in some cases the southeast as well. Maybe not so much on the east bank of the Dnieper if they could consolidate much of this area, which I would envision that they would almost have to do at some point. Because again, these areas of control are very thin, and these supply lines could be severed really at a moment's notice by the Ukrainian military. And given the tactical air situation for the Russians, again, we're seeing the Russians really fly very low, and part of that is probably cloud cover. There's always low-hanging clouds and dense cloud cover over Ukraine, especially this time of year, but also flying at altitude without targeting pods. And then given the air defense situation that the Ukrainians possess in terms of S-300s and Buks, it would be in the detriment of those Russian aircraft to fly high. So that's why you're kind of seeing them fly low. And again, a lot of these attack runs that you see by the Russian aircraft, again, they're coming in very low, very fast, and for the most part, they appear to be dropping dumb bombs or rockets, or in some cases, some laser-guided rockets. But they're not attacking with precision. Again, they don't have the targeting pods, so it makes it very, very difficult to try and control the battle space outside of the besieged Kyiv pocket area, if in fact the Russians were looking to do that. So even if the Russians have air dominance, that air dominance in terms of using their tactical aircraft to interdict Ukrainian military units is proving not to be the best. And at the same time, even when they do fly low, we're seeing these Su-25s, we're seeing these Russian attack helicopters starting to be engaged by Stingers and other heat-seeking anti-aircraft defense systems, man-portable systems, that the Ukrainians are becoming more and more proficient at. And the Russians continue to lose aircraft in this conflict. So again, if you look at that aspect of it in terms of the tactical air situation for the Russians, which really isn't great at this point, and then having the Russians try to circumvent Kyiv, again facing forces to their front, forces to their rear, I don't know if it would be the best both tactical and strategic situation for the Russians to implement that plan. And we may be looking at the Russians in terms of kind of start to dig in near Kyiv and quite possibly focus on other areas of the conflict, because obviously right now a direct move into Kyiv outside of rubbleizing Kyiv is just not in the cards at this moment, and neither is other targets such as Odessa. Again, I think we're quite a bit ways off, weeks if not months, for a move on Odessa. And right now the Russians obviously are still having their hands full with cleaning up Mariupol, and we've not even really talked about other areas such as Kharkiv or Severodonetsk, and then I've even heard reports that the Russians may be making a move towards Kryvyi Rih, right over in this area. And this city would just be a nightmare given its size and the way it is shaped. It's a very long city. It's a very large city, and it's just a nut. I don't think the Russians have the capability of cracking at this point. I think we have to see a lot more consolidation in some of these other areas and cleaning up these pockets where the Ukrainians are still effectively operating, in some cases near Sumy, obviously near Kharkiv. But the Russians at this point, I understand they're attempting this deep battle doctrine, but at some point they're going to have to identify an area where they can win and really focus on that, and quite possibly divert forces and from some of these other areas and focus on winning in certain areas where they know they can win. And I think quite possibly that would be in the south at this point. I think the possibility for the Russians to win near Kyiv at this point is going to be very, very difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. I think Kharkiv, not impossible, but again, very, very difficult. So with that being said, it seems reasonable that they dig in, they continue to strike targets in Kharkiv, they continue to strike targets in Kiev, but they look to divert forces and look to win where they can win. And I think right now that's probably towards the south. But again, given the Russian strategy and, again, not having that unity of command, and where we're seeing really kind of 4 different command structures. We have operational area Kiev, operational area Kharkiv, we have the separatist areas, and then we obviously have the coming out of the Crimea area of operations as well. But again, given the size of the forces that the Russians have committed, they're going to need to commit probably many, many more forces in order to achieve a victory, or pause in some areas and continue to bombard and use tactical aircraft, and more importantly, use their most effective weapon at this point, which has been Iskanders and cruise missiles with intelligence assets on the ground to strike those Ukrainian targets in the inside of Ukraine. And again, I do believe at some point the issue with the Polish border is going to have to be addressed. We've talked about that before. We've also talked about, and we've heard that quite possibly the Belarus could be joining the fray. They could be entering the conflict. But again, as you look at that, the Belarusian military is not that large. It probably has anywhere between 20 and maybe 30,000 troops at the most. I believe they have about 4 effective combat brigades. They have a Spetsnaz brigade and an air mobile brigade. But given that they still have to protect their borders with Poland and the Baltic states, that's not a lot of forces that the Belarusians can provide to help out the Russians in this ongoing conflict. And if the Russians are really going to have to rely on the Belarusians to provide 1 or 2 combat brigades, maybe 6 to 7 battalion tactical groups additionally, outside of mobilizing reserves inside of Belarus, which is possible, that's not a good sign for the Russians, unfortunately for the Russians. But I would say that the assistance that the Belarusians could provide the Russians at this point is really marginal. And we would have to really kind of see a joint Belarus-Russian operation to move down along these border areas with Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and then obviously at some point Romania itself. But right now, I don't think that's in the cards. I think we really have to first see the Russians take control of Mariupol, and then once Mariupol is taken, then obviously the Russians can look at achieving more success in more other areas, because obviously they'll be able to divert forces, and I think they're already doing that. I think right now, especially in Mariupol, you're seeing a lot of National Guard units. You're seeing quite a few Chechen units operating in Mariupol, attempting to clear that city out, and they continue to fight, and Mariupol's all but destroyed. And at some point I would think that the Russians just decide to completely level Mariupol, given the continued fighting on the ground, and that's probably something they're actively considering at this point. And not to say that's not already been rebelized, but we're pretty close to that point anyway. But that's kind of where we're at on the ground right now. Obviously, we're continuing to watch what's happening in Kyiv very closely. We are seeing some of those operations by the Ukrainians that have been marginally successful. and have actually taken, again, some areas back from the Russians. And then we're also seeing, again, that Ukrainian, some of these limited counterattacks kind of revolving around brigade and multiple battalion tactical groups for the Ukrainians that are attempting to push back against the Russians near Mykolaiv in the direction of Kherson. And we know that the Kherson International Airport has been hit on multiple occasions, and it sounds like the Russians are not even using that now in terms of operating tactical aircraft or helicopters out of that facility now, because the Ukrainians really kind of have a bead on that target with long range rocket fire. And obviously the Ukrainian drones continue to operate as well. But right now the most successful piece or component of the Russian strategy right now seems to be those cruise missiles and those Iskanders that they continue to use. And obviously their artillery is also being used with great effect as well. But that's where we're at today. Obviously, we will continue to cover and have more very, very soon. Have a good day, everybody.